Okay, so we're moving now into chapter 2, and the first figure we see in chapter 2 is Herod the king, and Herod is this paranoid kind of maniac, really, is what it amounts to. So I want to read a little bit of this to you and then try to tease out who's Herod, who are the wise men, how is this being set up to be, the reality of the shadow of the Exodus story and the destruction of the infants in the Exodus story. That's what I want to work towards, just to kind of give you this overarching narrative here, because I think it's really important to Matthew. Matthew needs his gospel to be reflective of the Passover. He needs it to be reflective of the Exodus story. So, let me just start here. Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, this is important. This is a messianic prophecy. The Messiah will be born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. Herod the king, he's reigning around 4 BC, is what it amounts to. Behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews?" Oh boy. "For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him." All right, so there's just a ton to unpack here in just that small little line. So who are the wise men? They're magi. It actually comes from the Persian word magus. And most likely what we have here are Zoroastrians who were famous worldwide. Well, that's not fair, worldwide. They were famous in the Near East and the whole Mediterranean for being those who were the greatest of astronomers / astrologers. It's a fine line between those two things. These are Persians. These are outsiders. These aren't believers. But what they do is they look at the stars. And they look at the stars because they think the stars are indicators of divinity, if not divinity itself. You can read the world through the stars. So here they are, these wise men, Persians, who are looking, and they come because they see something very, very anomalous here. And this is ultimately the question. Let me read a little more, and then we'll get to the question of the star. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. Where's the Christ? Where's the Mashiach? Where's the Messiah to be born? Who's the Messiah? Huge question. I have no time to tease that out. But we know it's either a king who brings in earthly peace, or a priest, depending on which oral tradition, or in some way, shape, or form, both. You can go to the Epistle to the Hebrews if you want the both imagery there. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea. For it is so written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will govern my people Israel." That's Micah chapter 5, verse 2. You can see what Matthew's doing. Matthew sees this as a messianic prophecy. This is your king. Well, he picks up on the king. Why? Well, because what's Herod? Herod's the ruler of this area. Herod doesn't want a king. Herod, in fact, is, one, he's just known for being paranoid. Pretty brutal guy. But this is going to be provocative. Now, let me just share a little something with you from the Jewish oral tradition, because we know what Herod does. Herod will eventually unleash hell on these people. he's going to go through what we call the slaughter of the innocents. Kill all of the children of the area. And you may think, my goodness, that's brutal. And of course it is. But here's the other thing. What story does it mimic? What story in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, can you remember that is something similar to this? I hope your mind immediately goes to Exodus, the slaughter of the Hebrew children. And even there, I say the Hebrew children, but that may be a little too limiting. Here's a fun little thing in the Jewish oral tradition. When Pharaoh gives his order to go and slaughter all of the children there in Egypt, it's predicated upon, it turns out, again, in the oral tradition, it's not in the written word, but in oral tradition, it's predicated upon one of his magicians came to him and said, a boy is going to be born to you, dear Pharaoh, who's going to overthrow you. And in the oral tradition, they don't know if he's Egyptian or Hebrew. They have no idea. It was simply a magician who came to Herod. I hope you see the connection here. What do we have here coming to Herod? It's the Magi. It's literally these magicians who are coming to him saying, a king will be born. What did Pharaoh do? He heard from his magicians, someone's going to overthrow you. Of course, it was Moses. And so what does he do? He says, slaughter them all. Every male that's born to you. Oftentimes when we read scripture, we think it's only the Hebrew children. But in the oral tradition, it was both Hebrew and Egyptian because Pharaoh was so worried someone was going to overthrow him. And I think we see the same thing here. Herod is just going to wipe them all out. He does not care who is going to be wiped out here in this slaughter. For Matthew, this is really important that we have yet another telling of the Exodus story. So then what does he say? Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word that I may too come worship him. All right, so he's obviously lying. And I didn't even pick up on the star. I skipped right over the star. We may ask, what's the star? If any of you have watched your History Channel or your A&E or whatever YouTube channels we watch, everyone wants to know, oh, the star must be able to give us a date. This must be a comet. Is it Halley's Comet? Is it Saturn that's at this? Let's figure it out so we can finally know when Jesus was born. I don't think we're dealing with a comet or a star here. I think what intrigues the Persians, again, who are great astronomers, is a star that's very, very specific. And a star that sits right over where God is to be born. And they see it, and that's anomalous. That is absolutely, positively anomalous, and they know this isn't right. This isn't normal. We must go and follow this. And note, they're foreigners coming into a foreign land, seeking out whatever the stars are telling them, and this one star in particular. When they had heard the king, they went their way, and lo, the star which they had seen in the east went before them. What a bizarre line. Till it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. Why would they do this? They're just looking for a star, but they know stars predict things. This is just the ancient world. We think nothing of it. But in the ancient world, stars dictated who you were. If you were born under a certain star, under a certain sign, I know we all look at our horoscopes and we think, what a bunch of bunk. Or we don't. We think, oh no, this has got to be true. What they're doing here is they're actually lining up more with, this has got to be true than this has got to be bunk. Whatever your sign is, it kind of dictates what your interior life is, who you are. And if the stars aren't lined up with you, everything's off kilter. what are they doing? They're reading the stars as if it's something important, and it brings them very much to God himself. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Good Lord, if it were all just this easy. I mean, I go to church every Sunday, and I've got a chalice in front of me for the love of God. A chalice, and I think empty thoughts. And these are foreigners who know nothing of any of this, and they bow down and they worship. This is one more time. We can go through it throughout Scripture. Hagar the Egyptian, who's a model to Israel. I have heard your suffering, now go suffer. We can look to Jonah and the Ninevites being the model for Jonah. The Ninevites, of all the people in the world, they're the model. We can turn to Jethro, the Midian priest, who comes out of almost the woodwork in the Exodus narrative. And he's like, hey, I hear your God's great. Yeah, I think I'll do that. The whole point, I think, here is it's carrying on in this biblical tradition that it always seems to be the outsiders who get it. And it's never the insiders. Ever the insiders. And when I say the insiders, don't mishear me. I don't simply mean Christians versus Jews in the New Testament. For me, when I read the New Testament, guess what they all are? They're all faithful Israelites. So it's not Christians versus the Jews at this point. My goodness. Here you have outsiders who recognize here comes the Messiah, and here is our model, and it continues a pattern that we see of the outsider versus the insider. And sometimes the outsiders get it just right. Then opening their treasures, they offered gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And everyone wants to know, what's gold, what's frankincense, and what's myrrh? Well, that's pretty simple. That's gold. The ancient church saw these three gifts as indicating gold is a gift appropriate to God. We give him everything of worth. If you go into any ancient church, oh golly, if you go to Greece now, if you go to Russia, if you go to Rome, you go to any place that has an old church, it is ensconced in gold and silver and bronze because beauty was appropriate to God. All right. What's frankincense? Well, frankincense is just simply incense. And of course, that is what we offer to God in the temple. It's a religious offering. And let me just go back here with gold. I said it's what we offer to God, which is true in a liturgical sense. But it's also what we offer to a king, is it not? When you go to a king, you simply offer him that. There's your messianic tie-in there. The frankincense is particular to God because this is what we offer to him. Let my prayer rise as incense. That's what we offer. But the myrrh is really interesting. And the myrrh goes back to what I was talking about with regards to we should probably read all gospel texts through the lens, always, no matter where we are, through the lens of the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ. It seems to me that's what the gospel texts are. It's pretty simple. Christ crucified, Christ resurrected. That's what we get. Of course, the ascension finishes everything off 40 days later, 40 being the number of completion. Great. So we offer myrrh. What for? What's myrrh indicative of? Oh, it's what's offered up at funerals. That's what we offer at the death of somebody. It's been that way in the ancient world. If you read Ovid's Metamorphoses, you actually get in Book 10 the origin of myrrh. And this is something that's offered up in funeral rites. Well, what's it looking forward to then? If they offer him that gold to a king or God, frankincense to God, and myrrh to a funeral at a child's birth? That seems odd, except it's not. Again, this is written 50 years after the fact. They know exactly what it looks forward to. Christianity, it seems to me, is an eschatological faith. We're never not looking to the end. This text is never not looking to the end. It already knows the end of the story, and it gives us these things. The beauty of the incarnation is it is already looking forward to the crucifixion and the resurrection, and, of course, the ascension. That's what unites us back to God. In fact, if you look at any Byzantine icon of the Nativity, what you will find is the Christ child in a manger, in a cave. But when you look at his clothing, because the text says they wrap him in swaddling cloths. But iconography, Byzantine iconography, they don't depict him like that. They depict him in a funeral shroud. They're already looking forward to the death of Christ. They already see it there. And so we have to keep that gospel message in the back of our minds as we're reading through this. Let us not just read this simply chronologically, as if there's some... I know it's an odd thing. I'll be honest, I don't know what it means to be a first-time reader of the Gospels. I can't remember. I only know this, that the gospel of Christ is Christ crucified and resurrected. Everything fits in that narrative. So when we go through these things, we're looking forward, and I promise you, when you read these texts closely, when you have a good annotated Bible, if I were you, I'd get the Oxford Annotated Bible edited by Herbert May and Bruce Metzger, RSV, Revised Standard Edition. I love it. It's the biblical text. I think it's still true. I'm old now, but it used to be true. That every seminarian from Reformed to Eastern Orthodox, everybody has access to or uses the Metzger and May Oxford Annotated Bible. Use it. It gives you all of these references to all of these Old Testament texts. Then it's just a matter of reading to see what's going on here. So now we understand. Gold, frankincense, myrrh, these aren't random gifts. They're supposed to be indicative of the status of Christ. And even there, you'll see some, I just said frankincense is a gift that you give to God. But if I follow and go, well, gold is appropriate to a king, well, then what's frankincense appropriate to? Turns out, a priest. It's not just God. It's not what we offer to God. It's what a priest actually uses. I think Matthew's trying to tie up the priest and the king messianic imagery here, just in these three gifts. The myrrh is obvious. That's the death of Christ. And now one final note. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, notice dream here is there again. They departed to their own country by another way. Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Rise, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there till I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. And he rose and took the child and mother by night and departed to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. Notice, it's the same thing that happens to Moses. Moses only goes back when God tells him, the Pharaoh who sought out your life, he was dead. Matthew's doing the same thing here. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, out of Egypt have I called my son. That's Hosea 11:1. It is one more time that Matthew's trying to remind us. This is the Exodus story. This is the Exodus story. And what I really love is that what Herod has done here is he's tried to get the wise men to give up things, but the wise men were told They go a completely different direction. And I think it's because the wise men have bowed down before Christ. I think they worship him, and I think they're trying to undo Herod, the way in which the Hebrew midwives and all of the women in Exodus tried to undo Pharaoh. I think it's a complete recapitulation of that story, and it's because in the New Testament, as far as I understand it, and maybe I don't understand it very well, but as far as I understand it, it is simply trying to show the way in which the life of Christ is the fulfillment of all of those things that one finds in Scripture, in the Hebrew Bible, in the Old Testament. And I think that's exactly what Matthew is going through here. And he wants to highlight it with regards to the death of the innocents. He wants to show Christ has come out of Egypt. I call Israel my son, which of course in the Old Testament, guess what that meant? It meant Israel is his son. Here in the New Testament, just to show you the relationship, here it's trying to take very literal. I call out of Egypt my son. Here he's speaking specifically of Christ as the fulfillment of what Israel was called to do coming out of Egypt. Israel, clearly the son collectively of God, but only as a foreshadowing and a fulfillment, according to Matthew, of what that actually means with regards to Christ. And so what you get here in the Nativity, I hope what you understand, what I've been trying to kind of offer to you here, is explicitly showing you the way in which even the Nativity story is already looking to the Passover. It's already looking to Easter. It's already looking to Pascha. Look at verse 29. The Lord appeared in a dream. Look at how many times the Lord appears in a dream to Joseph. Rise, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead. And there you go. That's Moses. That's the speech to Moses. That he tells him, go back, the Pharaoh's gone. This is what Matthew's tapping into. So, I know it seems bizarro if we're talking about the Nativity story. I should be focusing on the Nativity, and we should be thinking about my favorite Christmas movie, The Peanuts Christmas. Thinking specifically only in the terms of the Nativity. But if you understand the Gospels, we can't do that. It's not just about the Nativity. The Nativity was always only about the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ. That's the Gospel. We ought not lose sight of that. And everything that Matthew is doing is tapping into that tradition. So, until next time, we'll work through some more of this stuff with these nativity narratives.